Okay, well, I'll call the meeting to order, and I guess the first item we have is the oath, unless we, is it possible to move that to later when Tim comes on, or what do we want to do?
I'm going to defer to Julie Eddington, the Port Counsel, related to that. Julie, we're just missing Tim Keller, and he's, part of the first item, the oath of office. So thoughts on that, Julie?
I would suggest that the members who are needing to do the oath that are present should do it before the meeting so that they can vote on matters. And then we may have to do it again if Mr. Keller joins the meeting.
All right. Well, let's do that. So I do have the oath up here for Rob Lund. Rob, would you like to go ahead and read this?
I raise my right hand.
Sure.
When I used to testify in court, I always had to do that. So, I, Robert Lund, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Minnesota, and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of the Port Authority of the city of Bloomington in the county of Hennepin, state of Minnesota, to the best of my judgment and ability.
All right. And I know that Commissioner Lund is going to sign that document and send it in to Carolyn, as will Commissioner Keller once we for him.
Before we do that, maybe you should explain why he's raising his right hand in court all the time, and that's what he's used to doing. I'd like to hear some details on that, perhaps.
Well, when I was gainfully employed, I did a fair amount of litigation work on real estate matters, eminent domain. I worked for the city of Bloomington many times. I've worked for Bloomington School District a number of times, and I also worked for property owners. And also did tax abatement work, usually going nose to nose with somebody like Matt Gershwell, but never in Bloomington. I never did any tax protest work in Bloomington, but and then damage suits and things like that over the years where the value of property was affected. And I think I did a job for Kraus Anderson once defending them. They had built a building with a parapet wall and it failed. It leaked all over and there was damage and things like that. So I did a lot of litigation work. And so kind of combat pay.
Well, Rob, we're delighted to have you for another 6 years on the ports, and you contributed a lot, obviously, with your knowledge in real estate. One of the things I was thinking about is when I first went on the port, when Jim Lindahl appointed me, he made a real effort to get people with different backgrounds, and I think that tradition has continued on the port. And we've got you and Tim as a lawyer and Cynthia as a banker, and we've got Steve is just a good all-around with the city council and obviously the mayor. So, I mean, again, it's really good to have people with different backgrounds. So I guess the next item on the agenda then is the approval of minutes. So I would entertain a motion for the approval of minutes from our meeting December 15th.
Before we do that, we need to do the call to order and
Okay.
Do attendance.
All right, do you want to do the call, Carolyn?
Yep. Bussey, for call to order.
Present.
Carter,
Present.
Erickson,
Present.
Hunt,
Present.
Keller, we're working on him. Lunds,
Here, present.
Peterson.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Erickson, thank you.
All right, thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is the approval of the minutes for the December 15th meeting. So I would entertain a motion for the approval of those minutes.
Moved by Peterson.
Second,
Second by Bussey.
we have a motion made and seconded. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, Carolyn, please call the roll.
Sure. Bussey,
Aye.
oh, I'm sorry. Carter,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. 6-0.
And then the next item is the one we have to do every year, which is the election of officers. So I guess somebody wants to take action, nominating people, nominating the slate, whatever.
Mr. Chair, I will move that we appoint the slate of directors as shown on the slide with President Robert Harrison, Vice President Kim Bussey, Secretary Jenna Carter, Treasurer Cynthia Hunt, and the Assistant Treasurer Lori Economy Scholler.
Second.
The second, Carolyn, do you have that? Is that Commissioner
Lunds.
Okay.
Okay. And then for the motion, Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Erickson.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Keller, Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. 6-0.
Okay, well, moving right along then, we've got the next item is the appointment of our official newspaper. So I would entertain a motion for the appointment of our official newspaper, which I believe is the Sun Current.
I would comment on that. I'm all for that, but I wish every week the front page had a Bloomington story instead of a Richfield most of the time.
We have a motion made. Do we have a second?
Second.
That was Commissioner Carter.
Okay. For the motion call, Bussey,
Aye.
Sorry, I might
Bus-
be having some sound issues. I'm not sure if you called my name.
okay, Carter,
Aye.
thank you. Erickson,
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
and Peterson. 6-0.
Aye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item we have then is the appointment of our general counsel.
We're at the electronic funds transfer designation.
I'm trying to read my writing because I don't have a second computer here. Okay. So I entertain a motion for the electronic funds transfer designation.
Make the motion, Peterson.
Second by Hunt.
The motion made and seconded. Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Okay, Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Aye.
Hunt.
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
6-0.
Okay, and then the next one is the appointment of our general counsel. I would entertain a motion for that.
Motion for approval.
Second by Peterson.
Okay, Carolyn, do you want to call the roll?
Okay, Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Erickson, Hunt,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
and Peterson.
Aye.
And Mr. Keller is joining us, 6-0. I believe.
So if he's joining us, do we want to then take and have him take the oath?
Yes, I believe so.
Tim's fully in and unmuted. We can pop back and do the oath of office for that.
Welcome, Commissioner Keller.
Tim? He is,
You might
Dial in
still
for
be getting
20.
logged in.
All right, Shane, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Can I finish what I'm saying, please? I've been dialing in for
Of course.
20 minutes. I could hear you all just fine, and you couldn't hear me. I don't know what the hell's the matter with that, but I finally got the computer to work. Probably we should look in it because it is really annoying to do this over and over and over again.
Oh, I know.
Okay, that's my speech.
Well,
You-
I'm not
All right.
speak again. You-
Well, should we go back and do the oath? Tim, are you able to, do you have that in front of you, or
Yeah.
can you see the screen?
I can see the screen. Everything's just ducky now. So do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
I, Timothy Keller, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of the Port Authority of the city of Bloomington, the county of Hennepin, and the state of Minnesota to the best of my judgment and ability.
All right.
So help me.
So thank you, Commissioner Keller, and again, we look forward to interacting with you in the future. So do we want to go back to the agenda then, Shane?
That sounds like a good idea. I think we're on general counsel, Mr. President.
We're on-
Thanks.
We did the general counsel. I think we're on the bond council, aren't we?
Nope, we haven't done general counsel yet.
I thought we did.
I think,
Two point,
did we have a motion and a second, and then we're ready to vote?
I made the motion.
yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
2.4 was general counsel. So we're on the approve appointment of the bond counsel.
Okay,
Apologize.
Okay.
all right. So I would entertain a motion for the approval of the bond council.
Moved by Peterson.
And by Hunt?
Okay, Carolyn, do you want to call the roll?
Sure. Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Hunt,
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
7-0. Thank you.
Okay, we are then down to the approval of our municipal advisor, which would be Springston, or not Springston anymore, Baker Tilly. So would entertain a motion for that.
So moved.
Second by Peterson.
We have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Not Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Bussey,
Aye.
Tim, yes?
Aye.
Thank you. Carter,
Aye. Excuse me.
Erickson,
Aye.
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. 7-0.
Okay, and then the next one is the designation of official depositories. I assume, Cynthia, you're going to recuse yourself on this as you've done in the past.
Mr. Chair, yes, I will recuse myself from the vote, but I would have a comment at the appropriate time.
Okay, well, why don't you make your comment right now?
Okay. So separating from the depository institutions, my comment pertains to the spreading out of the funds at over 30 some financial institutions. And my question again, it's maybe more of a comment that, and I think this is now within what the city council has recommended, but I'm questioning how much involvement is done on actually checking the strength and financial stability of the financial institution. In my experience, it's often sometimes a leading rate that could attract somebody, and maybe the individuals or entities aren't doing the due diligence. And so many financial institutions have aren't at the strongest position, perhaps. And on these small dollar amounts, I think it's maybe perhaps meaning to be an admirable thing to spread the between the institutions. But my concern is always with the strength of that individual institution and so forth. So that's my comments pertaining to that. And rather than looking at, and I don't know how much time city staff has to spend on looking at the efficiencies of the institutions, the wherewithal, and just the general ratings. So that's my concern versus what might be done on the actually the depository part. And to clarify again, I think you maybe mentioned it, Bob, I recused myself because I'm an employee and officer of U.S. Bank, but separating those comments out specifically pertaining to the institutions for the CDs.
Thank you, Commissioner Hunt. So Commissioner Hunt has recused herself, so I would entertain a motion then for the approval of our designated official depositories.
Moved by Peterson.
Second,
Bunce?
yes.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Hunt,
Choosing myself.
thank you, Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you, 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, I got one more comment on that one before we move on, just to follow up on what Cynthia had to say.
Okay, and Carolyn, I think your vote was 6 with one recusing themselves instead of 7-0.
Excuse me.
For the record.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you. And I just, I think that because all of the institutions are eligible institutions, to my understanding, under the kind of financial policy of the city and the Port Authority. And I think in particular, in order to avoid the need to do a kind of individual credit analysis of the banks, we limited the amount that we deposit in each institution to the kind of insurance coverage that each institution has. And so if you look at that second paragraph that's in the particular agenda item, it talks about that sort of thing. And so at least for me, as long as we continue to adhere to that financial policy of staying below the insurance threshold, I think I'm comfortable with that. If we were starting to have more money in institutions than we're at that level, then I would share Cynthia's concerns in regard to that. And we'd have to do more credit analysis on those individual institutions.
Can I make a follow-up comment to that, Mr. Chair?
Certainly.
The only comment is I would suggest, and as long as it's the ratings and so forth, with whatever the city has opted for, but it's best never to have to rely on that FDIC insurance. It's better to look at first at the preemptive and look at the strength of an institution rather than at some point think you have to rely on that. So, just a comment.
Okay, if there's no further comments, and I guess that we can then move on to item 2.8, which is the appointment of the external auditor.
Mr. President, I wonder if the CFO, Lori Economy-Scholler, had any comments on that discussion before we move on.
Oh,
to the next
certainly.
item.
Lori, if anything you'd like to add, please do.
Mr. President and Commissioners, when we do look, I would say, first off, we've only have a few CDs purchased so far through the process, and none of that is with Port Authority money at this point. We are going slowly through that process as we approach banks, and a lot of bank lobbies are closed, even to have conversations about CDs. So I would say that the program is moving forward, but very slowly. We are trying to stay below that insurance level. When we've had conversations with these locations and looked at their paperwork, granted, looking at their quarterly reports, their call reports might be the best solution to see where they are financially. It isn't always the easiest to try and obtain those to move forward. A lot of those small banks don't want to release those call reports, even though they are available. So if we were to start investing in a greater amount in those locations, we would definitely be doing a more in-depth analysis.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Any other comments before we move on to the next item? Okay, so then we're up to the appointment of our external auditor. I would entertain a motion for the appointment of the external auditor.
Move the appointment as discussed in the agenda item.
Second.
So the motion was made by Commissioner Peterson, seconded by Commissioner Carter, correct? Any further discussion? Carolyn, you want to call the roll?
Yes. Bussey,
Aye.
Carter,
Aye.
Erickson,
Aye.
Aye.
Keller,
Aye.
Lunds,
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Thank you. 7-0.
Okay, well, we've gone through those, so we're up to Shane, I guess, on the work plan.
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. The draft work plan is included in the packet, and I'll walk through the highlights of that for 2021, as well as the annual report for 2020, which has been quite an interesting year. So first and foremost, COVID certainly has impacted every project, almost every aspect of everything that the Port Authority has done in 2020 since mid-March. The most important task as it relates to, city work and whatnot has been to assist in projecting the impacts of the pandemic on city finances, in particular liquor, lodging, and admission tax revenue, so that the city can do their budgeting work. And that's going to continue on in 2021. We project roughly somewhere between a 3 and 5 year lead time to return to normal in those funds, assuming that they do return to normal. In particular, lodging, with business travel leading the decline right now. Leisure travel has rebounded better than business travel, and business travel is, of course, a big deal as it relates to subsidizing the city's general fund, as well as helping out BCBB and the South Loop Development Fund. But I think one of the things that the pandemic has really shown is how important those revenues are to the city. Right now, obviously, they're causing a budget challenge, but for decades and decades, they've been subsidizing city property taxes for as long as those tax revenues have been around. As we walk through the rest of the projects here and the rest of the initiatives, just know that obviously, I guess, the pandemic has been, a huge thing for everything that we've done to varying degrees. And maybe that's a good segue into SIC. As you know, we closed the SIC deal in 2020, which is a big project that we've been working on for a number of years, attracting SIC, reaching out to them, doing all the documents, and then finally closing that deal. And we're in the process now of just signing everything so that they can close on the first phase and start construction in the spring, which we anticipate that happening in 2021, and then continuing to work with them to determine the appropriate timeline for the next phase, which is their big office building out there. And so we continue to have a great relationship with them, and are happy to have them in the neighborhood. 2 other big projects closed. That's the Park and Fly development at also called ROSA. Jason's here for additional questions. He was the key person on that. But basically, that's a new residential development outside of Bloomington Central Station, housing TIF district there, all those documents related to that. We expect that project to break ground this year. And then American Square, the Ardor and the Quinn, that's phase 1 and phase 2. So you will recall that the Ardor is the market rate project and the Quinn is the affordable project. And the Ardor is slated to break ground this spring. Similar work product to the Rosa development, all the work with the developers, the development documents, the housing TIF district, etc. There's a fair amount of work to deliver those projects. So there's SIC, and then there's the Rosa development and another angle of Rosa, and then the Ardor, the phase 1 is on the far east side of that kind of triangular trapezoid. And then phase 2 is over here. And then, the commissioners feel free to, stop if you want to talk about any of these things. Obviously, this list is long, and we can certainly hold questions until the end if you want to do that as well. So, the water park project, obviously
Shane,
with the pandemic.
Shane, just because I can't see everybody, I mean, obviously, if somebody wants to talk, please let me know, and we can recognize you too as we go through this. So. Thank you.
Will do. I'll keep my eyes open. And I know Carolyn's watching folks as well. So the water park project is still, on the docket for 2021. Where that project goes will be determined by the economy of, the U.S. economy, the world economy, the tourism economy, and the revenue sources that would back it up. It's something that the council and port will get to decide at some point in 2021. Once we know more about those factors, we will work with the stakeholders and partners that we've worked with to date, and then present that to the City Council and Port Authority for a decision on that project once we know more. I know working with our other project partners, sitting here today, we don't have enough information to provide to the Council and Port Authority to make a recommendation, but that, we expect that to happen in 2021. Once again, once the pandemic, the end of the pandemic, the new normal, whatever you want to call it, once everything comes into better focus. But, everything's been on pause for that project since the pandemic locked things down in mid-March.
Shane, I think maybe it is just helpful to comment at this point in time that obviously it was good news that the mall paid their property taxes in November, so they're up to date on that. And they also have, achieved a renegotiation with their lenders, and so that they're in a situation where that hurdle has at least been taken care of to a degree. So again, it's really good to see that we've been able to reach those accommodations, and that obviously means that as things move along, and hopefully, as you were saying, we get through the period where COVID has such a negative impact on things that again, we can start looking at doing things again in the future.
Yep. Thank you. Yep. The mall is current on property taxes, and as reported in the news, is worked out an arrangement with their lenders and is now current on their mortgage. So obviously the pandemic has greatly impacted that project, as well as hospitality industry and so many other things. But it's good that they're in on better financial footing than they were obviously months ago during the heart of the pandemic. And then on legislation, the legislation in 2020 was an ongoing and iterative process. Usually, and of course in Minnesota, we've got a legislative session that ends in usually May. That didn't happen this year, as the legislature was, continued to be in session every month, every 30 days. And so that was a major work task in 2020. And depending on how the pandemic goes in 2021, that could be the case as well. We pursued the city's legislative agenda. We modified it a few times in 2020, and we may very well do that again in 2021 as we continue to change things as the conditions on the ground, so to speak, change. And so we'll try to move the city's legislative agenda forward. COVID small business loans. This was another big work task that Port staff worked with other community development staff to assist 152 small businesses with CARES money. 2021, we'll see, continued work on that as we continue to manage the paperwork, frankly, for that program, and assist with the audit that will come along with that. We've been careful along the way, and the staff that have been working closest to that have been really trying to make sure that every I is dotted and T's is crossed, so that when the eventual audit comes, we have everything in order. So there's a ton of work related to that.
Hey, maybe I could make another comment on that quickly. When we started the year out, I had been pressing Shane because I knew all the various projects that we had, and I had discussions with mayor and city manager too about whether we had sufficient staff for the Port Authority, and I think there was kind of a general conclusion that we probably needed to think seriously about augmenting that. And then, of course, COVID came along, and we got into a situation where not only were we having to do what we had to do, but there were a lot of additional things that needed to be done, and they're very important, such as this loan program. And I know Becky Schindler and And I don't know whether Jason worked some on that too, but I mean, again, there are a lot of people that put in a lot of extra time to get these things done. So it is something that when we look at what was done last year, it's easy to lose sight because we haven't seen a lot of this activity through the Port Authority. We get some summaries and we see some things, but I don't know, Shane, how many individual pieces of paper and things needed to be signed, but it was a lot. So it was obviously took a lot of work for a lot of people.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. So, yeah, I mean, 2020 was a curveball. Of course, we were doing a lot of things that we couldn't foresee in December, January when we were putting together the work plan for 2020. And you know, our work is so dependent on development cycles. You know, I think it's interesting. It's noteworthy that we did close 3 projects in 2020 because those are all, they represent a lot of work to get those to that stage. And you know, once we get to the next phases here of the work plan, you'll see that we've got a couple, you know, 2, 3 more in the pipeline, and that's about what the port can handle, depending on the complexity of the project. And then, you know, in the list here too, you know, there's all the other little things that come up. They get hot or they don't. So yes, as President Erickson had mentioned, you know, at the beginning of 2020, end of 2019, we were becoming very stressed with the projects that we had coming up, and COVID changed all that. It did kind of threw us a curveball, but some things slowed down a little bit. And you know, one of the things that's on the end of this document is some organizational items that I would love to be able to execute and do in 2021. They always kind of fall to the bottom half of the to-do list, so to speak, because we've got projects that with developers and things that take precedent. But I'm really hoping that we can get to those items that are at the end of this document and clean some of those things up. But right now, I think, you know, the staffing, we're doing okay right now. You know, if the economy picks up and a bunch of these projects click, we're going to have to consider staffing up. And of course, that'll be a discussion with the port and city manager, mayor, et cetera. But noted, and we were definitely being stressed at the end of 19 and 20, and we'll continue to monitor that and try to act quickly so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we're playing catch up. So, thanks for that, Mr. President and Commissioners. With that, I'll keep moving on. There was a project
Shane, I got one more comment kind of while the slide is up. You know, we've talked a couple times about kind of my desire to add a kind of smaller business dimension to the activities of the port. And, you know, one of the things that I think was really interesting, and it's unfortunate that it happened because of the pandemic, but kind of getting involved in this small business loan program and understanding what the mechanics are of running that, I think was actually a really good opportunity for the staff to kind of understand what is the mechanics of something like that might go on and how might that work. And so I still think that there is an opportunity, in addition to the work that we do around these larger projects, for the port to be involved in supporting small businesses in the community. And so as we're thinking about that, figuring out how to do that in a way that isn't super expensive administratively, where like if you came back and said we can do a small business support program, but half the cost of it is in staff and half of it is in benefit that goes to small businesses, I would have a problem with that. But thinking about what we can be doing to support small businesses, and in particular, taking some of the things that are unique about Bloomington and helping small businesses kind of grow up around that, I think would be from a theme, something I'd be looking for for the port to get more involved in.
Mr. President, Commissioner Peterson, I think speaking for staff and myself, we'd agree. We'd love to do more of that. Of course, it does take time and money to do that, staff time and money. We've, of course, focused on kind of the medium to large businesses with SICK, and prior to that, Polar Fab, Skywater. We are working with another kind of mid-sized company right now that's not ready to be talked about publicly in the thick size that's growing, entrepreneurial, things like that. It would be great to locate them in South Loop. And so we continue to run those leads down for those medium-sized businesses. And we really relied on Hennepin County and our partnership with MCCD to do the Open to Business program and connect small businesses to resources they need to expand. But we haven't specialized in that, and we certainly don't have, we contribute to the MCCD partnership with Hennepin County, but it's relatively small dollars. But that's been our avenue. But noted, and I think the to-do coming out of that, I made a note, we can come back to the port at a future meeting and provide some options and what that would mean as far as cost to either the Port Authority, as it can operate in South Loop with the dedicated money that we have there, and then larger than that, if it's operating outside of South Loop, then we have to look at other funding sources. But the port has a levy; it's never been turned on. Of course, there's always the option to do that at any level. Be it a small number, $100,000 a year, all the way up to roughly $2 million a year would be the maximum. Well, it's somewhere between $2 or $2.2 million, somewhere in that neighborhood where the maximum would be, which is what the HRA currently levies. But you could turn on a port levy at any level.
So I think if we're going to go down that path, I don't want it to be something that replicates something that's being done at another level. So if there's an option between doing it ourselves or spending somebody else money to go and do the same thing that they're doing now in our area, I'd rather kind of go down and do that path. But thinking about, kind of the unique assets that we have and what are things that we could do related to small business and those unique assets, I think that's the intersection that I'm trying to look for and what if we're going to go do something.
Mr. President, Commissioner Peterson, yeah. So just a quick summary, and Becky's on. She works with MCCD closer than I do, but quick summary on MCCD is that they're a connector and they're sometimes a lender. So it's not an expensive program for the port or the city to manage, and it's certainly not providing, $10,000 grants on a monthly basis to help, businesses. So it's relatively inexpensive to do that. But there are lots of cities, certainly, Minneapolis, St. Paul in particular, that have a lot more muscular small business development program, and they put more money towards it too. So let us do a little research and, go ahead.
I was just going to comment. I thought it was nice that the city was able to provide those. Sometimes those are it seemed limiting at one hand because it was such smaller dollar amounts, but I would imagine that those clients or businesses that received it were very appreciative of the money. And I know it's an incredible amount of work for staff and so forth. And so again, maybe Shane, just as you mentioned, exploring more relationships. I know we had worked a long time with MCCD, which is a long time organization, great organization that partners with financial institutions to do some of those. So it's worth discussing at a future point.
And so Shane, if I could just, follow up a little bit more, I could give you an example of the sort of thing that I think that, and it would be the sort of thing that when I talk about kind of uniquely positioned as a city is, if we decided, for example, that we wanted to make Bloomington more of a restaurant destination than it is, and, when people on Facebook have complained sometimes that there's no restaurants in Bloomington that they want to go to, and I reel off the list of restaurants, and there's tons and tons of them. But I think there's an opportunity, for example, between us and the Convention Bureau to try to figure out how to get Bloomington's reputation around dining to be more than just large dining restaurants and something that would be kind of more entrepreneurial restaurant businesses, because it has a synergy with our tourism business. It has a small business sort of thing, and we've been hearing. And I've heard from people that they would like to see more options in that area. So that's an example. I'm not pitching that particular idea, but that's an example of how we might kind of take something and create some synergies out of what we've got right now. And with a modest amount of effort, make a big impact.
Do people, I'm surprised to hear this, people actually complaining about restaurants in Bloomington?
Like just lack of variety. I think people want more. And I can find, Tim, sometime I'll find you the Facebook post that I made where I listed all of the what I would call non-chain restaurants.
Yeah, I get,
Yeah.
you know, and I appreciate the reality of that. It's just that we're in this metropolitan area, and I'm just, you know, I am what I said, surprised.
Yeah, if you look at, if you're a small restaurant entrepreneur and you want to start a restaurant business in Bloomington, there's some barriers to that. You know, I'm just kind of going and looking at that.
Okay, well, I get it. I just, I'm surprised it's a deal.
Mhm.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that that's the thing that we go down. I think that there's a step before where we need some ideation around, you know, what are the assets that we have and what are areas that we could focus on that are where we're uniquely situated to go after it.
Yeah, because I to hear you talk about it, I'm thinking, I don't know where these places would go, right? And we've got the strip, and then we've got single family housing and apartment buildings. And
yeah.
There's not, there doesn't feel to be that sort of Minneapolis neighborhood cafe kind of location.
Maybe part of our role is figuring out how to make a place for that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think when we start really getting more successful with the population density thing,
yeah.
Reed South at the good place. There is something over there already. There's a little restaurant over by that cluster of short-term stay places. That's really pretty good. Just don't mean to drag us down this path too far. I think it's an interesting question, and it calls into question the other stuff we've been talking about with respect to groceries and drugstores and all of that stuff.
I think, if I may, Commissioner Peterson, I mean, we of course tried to do that with, you know, the Hazel. I think Commissioner Keller's even talking about Hazelwood. It's also, I mean, if we would have let that naturally develop, there would not be a restaurant there. That developer wanted to put in 2 hotels, and we sunk a bunch of money into a parking ramp and required that there be, you know, a restaurant and a coffee shop there. Of course, the coffee shop now, post-pandemic, didn't make it, and that's too bad. But the restaurant is still doing well, and I know that
restaurant's pumping out hamburgers and chickens like nobody's business. I was staying at the Element Place for a couple of nights for reasons we won't get into. It was mobbed. It was really mobbed. It's a great concept for that place. They take out, you know, the short-term stay place. I'm stunned that nobody thought of that as an entrepreneur.
Jim, what's the name of it again? What is the name of it again you were speaking of?
Shane, why don't you remind me?
Hazelwood, I think.
Hazelwood.
Oh, Hazelwood. As someone who has a son that's a chef and has worked at a number of higher-end restaurants in the Twin Cities, he always remarks too he'd like to see more variety in Bloomington, where he's spent his early years.
Well, one of the things that's going to happen is that as density goes up out there, it becomes more Minneapolis-like in that sense, not in other way, but that affords more opportunities, as we know, with the grocery store and everything else. So I'm excited about what can happen in that area as that moves along.
President, sorry, I think I might have been interrupting somebody.
Well, that's fine. I'll wait.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess 2 points to the restaurant issue. I definitely heard a lot about that when I was knocking on doors in 2019, and I do think a lot of that is really related to the neighborhood corridors and the neighborhood business corridors, where people want to have more opportunities to visit nice restaurants with patios and things like that. But I do agree with the whole conversation. And then, Shane, can you remind me, do we have somewhere easily accessible for us, kind of some overarching goals or priorities for the Port Authority? Because, I mean, I really appreciate the work plan and kind of getting in the weeds, but it would be helpful for me to kind of, at the same time, be looking at kind of our overarching priorities. So, you know, as we talk about small businesses, more restaurants, a grocery store, like what are these lining up to? And it's just, I think I just need my memory jogged in terms of where to find that.
Yep, President and Commissioner. So the Port Authority, this goes back to the history a little bit, and we do, people will probably get sick of me saying, you know, what the South Loop District Plan goals are. But over and above that are the Port Authority goals, which we do talk about sometimes. But that actually gets to Commissioner Carter, the work plan and some of the organizational things at the bottom of the document that I love to be able to get at, and kind of dovetails with a potential update to the South Loop District Plan to modernize the Port Authority's mission, if you will, to make sure that we're doing what the Port and the Council want the Port Authority staff to be doing and aiming at. But to date, the Port Authority, you know, organized, you know, in the 80s and can operate anywhere in the city. But, you know, in the past 15 years, its main thrust has been to implement and develop the Airport South, now called South Loop area. To that end, develop the South Loop plan, and that's what we've been doing, you know, is diligently implementing the South Loop plan. Now, the Port Authority can operate anywhere in the city, and there's been a lot of talk on staff and intermittently with commissioners and council members and things like that about the Port doing more citywide, and we're certainly open to that conversation. It just takes, you know, time, people, and money is all, and that's the trick, right? Is that there's only so much time, people, and money, and whether the Port turns on a levy or the City Council inches up the City Council levy, it's all, you know, it impacts the Bloomington taxpayer in the same way. And outside of legislative changes for some of our development funds, which we can certainly talk about. So we hear you. Again, COVID would have been a great time to spend time doing some of that organizational stuff, but we got waylaid with other things and COVID-related tasks, and I'm hopeful that the development cycle, well, I hope the development cycle is as robust as it was in 2019. We could just deliver lots of projects, but I'd also love to carve out some time for that organizational stuff because it needs to happen, and it helps provide a shell for what we're doing.
I totally agree. Yeah, thanks for that context too.
Okay, Shane, I think you're free to move along.
Can I make a request, Mr. President? If I could, I'm getting a lot of background noise. If people could please mute their microphones if you're not talking. I'm just getting a lot of background noise. It's kind of distracting from everything else. If you could do that, that'd be great.
All right. So I think, well, as I said, on the small business loan and program and small business development generally, we will take that on as a work task and bring some options back for the Port, and Commissioner Carter's comments about Port mission. That's something that we will focus on as well. All right, well, I'm going to click through some of these things relatively quickly. So Mall of America Transit Station, that project was completed in 2020 early. We did have an in-person event out there before the pandemic, which was nice. What we'll do in 2021 is analyze some creative placemaking options. We did have a plan sheet in the plan, if you will, which identified about a dozen locations where we could do some creative placemaking in that area. So we'll work on that. The Spruce Shadows Farm, so also known as the Kelly Farm, we continue to field development opportunities for the site and work with brokers and various other folks to analyze what can happen there. So that's ongoing. It heats up and then it doesn't, and then it heats up and then doesn't. Same thing with the Long Meadow Circle property, currently owned by MAC, with 2 parcels on the back side of that, owned by the O'Neill family. Again, continued interest that comes into focus and then goes away and comes in and goes away and so on that property. Mall of America future phases to the north and east. That's usually a lot busier than it was in 2020, but with the pandemic and the challenges that the mall and 555 were seeing, that did cool off, but there was still some activity there. But we expect that to get back to normal, if you will, moving into the future. Strategic planning for downturn. So I left this on there, and not so much because we did a lot of that in 2020 because we were in a downturn, but mostly as a note that, you know, we knew at some point there was going to be, you know, a downturn in retail at the mall, and we continue to focus on that. I know that there's a team of us at staff, and I know council and board members too, keep tabs on this. You know, what's going on in the retail market? How is it affecting the mall? What trends are happening that affect that? And I think you know, we'll continue to try to be innovative with the mall on projects, and not just the water park, but lots of other things. Water park, we don't need to go into that this evening. The Vermont Thunder site is also another active site. Obviously, the port owns that. The part of the agreement burns off with Mall of America in the second quarter of this year, first or second quarter. And we continue to field inquiries on that site, and we'll continue to do that in the future. And hopefully, that's a project that I could see coming to fruition in 2021, but we'll see. BCS residential phase 3, the Fenley, that opened in 2020. Obviously, McGuff tends to have terrible timing when they open residential projects. They opened the condo project, Reflections, in 2006 in the last downturn, and the Fenley unfortunately opened during the pandemic, but they've actually been doing okay on renting, and we'll continue to disperse funds on that PAYGO note. And then new project, the residential phase 4, doesn't have a name yet. Obviously, at the last Port Authority meeting, the Port Board acted on that, direct staff to continue working on that with a grocery component, which would be great. And so in the near future, we'll be bringing a term sheet, and then after that, development documents for the Port and Council to consider. There was still a little bit of activity early on in the year for office at Bloomington Central Station, but you know, I'm not sure that anybody knows what the future market for office is at BCS or anywhere else for that matter. You know, when people go back to the office or go back to the office a couple days a week, or who knows what it's going to look like with the new normal after the pandemic, but we'll continue to focus on that. The Park and Go development. So this is the project or the parcel that is west of 34th Avenue, northwest corner of American and 34th. So not Rosa, but the other surface parking lot. We continue to keep tabs on that project as they look towards the development of that site, probably in a similar fashion that Park and Fly will develop, which is in phases, and as they phase out the surface parking for the airport. Center for Inspiration, that project is on pause due to COVID. We'll continue to analyze that project with that's the space shuttle project that we bring it to someplace in South Loop and build an attraction around it, but there's been very little activity on that in 2020 due to COVID. Here's a picture of the Fenley project and the old Cedar Avenue Bridge. So there was a work effort to have a grand opening and all that related to the project. Thank all those that were involved in the project in 2020, but obviously gathering in 2020 isn't going to happen. If an event, you know, if the pandemic is such that in the fall people can get together in a big group, we'll do that. The Riverview Corridor streetcar, we support funding for the project. The pre-design, environmental, and public engagement work is starting now, and that work will be ongoing. Fire Station 3, that project completed construction. And again, that's another one where creative placemaking is going to come afterwards. And so Allie is working on a community garden option for that site, working with the fire department and access and the church and all that. So it'll be neat to see that get going. The World's Fair is still an active project. In 2020, we continue to monitor efforts to bring the expo to Minnesota and analyze city involvement. That work would be ongoing in 2021 as we look at the pandemic, we look at the fair, we look at international politics, and bring that project back to the Council and Port Authority to see you know, how the Council and Port want to be involved in that project moving into the future. The Carlton TIF project, we modified the TIF plan to dedicate that funding to the SIC project, and that work is ongoing. That fund will be closed out as soon as we spend all the money. The State Trail, that construction is ongoing, and we'll continue to monitor that and search for future funding opportunities to complete the State Trail consistent with the city's legislative policy. And then strategic parcels. And so you know, there are opportunities. There are opportunities to buy pieces of land during the pandemic. If there are opportunities to buy pieces of land in the pandemic, that makes sense for the council in Port, much like we did the Vermont Thunderbird. We would bring that to the boards for consideration. But we are always watching all the parcels that we can to make sure that we're not missing an opportunity. And then on just economic development generally, we continued participation with Greater MSP. We field calls from numerous businesses. We talked about open to business already. We meet with businesses and developers, and that work is all ongoing. Strategic planning, you know, we monitor port projects to ensure they're aligned with the city's strategic plan goals. Infrastructure planning, because South Loop will represent a fair amount of the increase in density in the city. It puts a strain on sewer and water and other infrastructure systems, and we work with other staff to manage that and monitor it and fund it. South Loop Development Fund, the liquor and lodging tax that is dedicated to South Loop, obviously that was impacted greatly by COVID, and we redid that whole budget. It's not a budget, excuse me, Lori, it's a projection because of the nature of the fund. But we redid that whole projection because of the impact of COVID on those funds, and that work is ongoing on a weekly basis. Normandale Lake District monitored interest in development out there. 2020 was a little lighter on that for sure. The Drury Inn administered the cleanup grant and continue to report to deed for 2021 on that. The senior project over on the Opus Development site administered cleanup. We will administer the cleanup grant in 2021. Opportunity zones, there are still folks interested in South Loop because of the Opportunity Zone program. And even though some of the benefits have burned off, there's still a big benefit to certain types of businesses and certain types of developments. The Foreign Trade Zone, continue to support the Foreign Trade Zone. At the next port meeting, we're going to have a presentation by Deed on the Foreign Trade Zone, who administers that for us, and that appointment is not on the agenda tonight, but it will be on that meeting after the port receives an update on the Foreign Trade Zone. The port will consider appointing port board members to the Foreign Trade Zone again. Currently, I serve as president, and former Mayor Winstead is serving on that board. Excel has an energy certified site program that we worked with them. It's another economic development program where they market sites that are available to development to site selectors. We've engaged with them on that. We do creative placemaking, and I supervise the creative placemaking director, and that work's ongoing. FAA MAC building height limits. The veterans will recall the issue that we had trying to maintain the buildable heights that we have out on the mall project with MAC. So we continue to work with MAC and the FAA to make sure that the surfaces, the MAC's building surfaces in South Loop haven't changed due to types of airplanes and navigation beacons and things like that. We did in 2020 contract with a firm to help manage public relations, and in 2021, based on port action previously, we would, once the pandemic subsides and we can, frankly, once we can afford it, to move to implement the renaming of 24th and 34th Avenue. We'll do that. We do a financial review and audit. And then the last thing here is the organizational items. Participated in the city's data management policy team, participated in the city boards and commissions work group. That council did at the meeting here in early January, Jan 4, where they appointed Tim Keller and Rob Luns to new commissions, new 6-year terms as port commissioners. Did have a discussion about term limits and some things like that. It is an ongoing group that staff is participating in to normalize and sync up a lot of things related to all the city boards, be it advertising for applicants to onboarding, technology, and the whole slate of things. And so we did participate in that in 2020. and that work bridges over into 2021, so we'll still be working on that. And then the other items related to that, if we have time, we'd love to find time to redo the port's data management policy, update the bylaws, and consider all those things that the council talked about on Jan 4. And then also consider an update to the South Loop district plan. The district plan was approved back in 2013 and is still very much valid, the key points of it, but there are things that have happened in the city and things that the council has focused on since 2013, where it bears taking a look at the South Loop district plan to make sure that it is consistent with what the council's strategic plan and their initiatives, make sure everything's synced up. So that's going to be a work plan item for the planning department in 2022. And so I think added to that list is just a review of the port's mission. I think that's a good suggestion by Commissioner Carter. And with that, I'd be happy to dig deeper into any of that. And of course, got staff here, Jason and Becky and Lori and Julie, to answer all these questions. Everybody, this is obviously a team effort with all of us and lots of others that, on city staff that work to deliver this for the Port Authority.
So questions for Shane or any other very able staff? Well, Shane, I hear silence, so you must have taken and.
If I could, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one more basic question. Shane, I think you mentioned in your discussion about the Center for Inspiration, is that where the Challenger Learning Center would fall in? Is that kind of one and the same in terms of projects?
Mr. President and Commissioner Bussey, yes, the Challenger Learning Center and the Center for Inspiration are one and the same. And so the shuttle Inspiration is a mock space shuttle. And the Challenger Learning Center would be a component of that project where they do mini space camps, basically, for middle school kids and corporate clients. And there would be, in the concept plan that group is working on and that we analyzed, be a really neat project, really a hallmark project for Minnesota, frankly. But, it has a ways to go in order to be real. And of course, the pandemic certainly put that on hold, changed everything. So,
yeah, I agree. And that being said, I got the press release this week that they just opened their most recent one, their newest one this week in Pennsylvania, or last week, I guess. And so they're still moving forward. So if we can continue that, I agree that'd be a fantastic addition, I think, to the South Loop area. And I just wanted to add on the discussion that the City Council did have in our organizational business about boards and commissions. Just in general, we've been trying to formalize and make official how we manage our boards and commissions. I think a lot of times it was more ad hoc. There wasn't a specific process for each different group, each different board, each different commission, and we're just trying to make them as standardized as possible. Whether it boils down to things like, as Shane was saying, terms and requirements for applicants, or interview process, or just basically how to handle it, and how to handle it in a way that's not only consistent, but it's fair to everyone and it's equitable to everyone who's interested as well.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could respond to that, since I'm just renewed, to Commissioner Carter's point earlier about what it is our mission is, I sincerely doubt that any much more than 2% of the population in the city has any idea what we do. And I think, I'm not advocating for an advertising campaign about how great the Port Authority is, but I think the solution to that problem, if it's perceived as a problem, it's going to be recruiting people and telling them what their role would be and how valuable it would be to have them participate in it. It's you look at this, the website, and you kind of have an idea what, city planning kind of is, but the Port Authority does sound a little Popeye-like, and it's not going to, jump out at people other than asking where the port is. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree with you completely, Tim. I do. And I mean, I know that Steve can remember times. I mean, from my time on the council, I remember where we were actually calling and recruiting people to apply for all of our boards and commissions, begging people to apply for the boards and commissions opening that we have, and we'd end up with 1 or 2 applicants for a board position. Now, I think most recent, Jenna, maybe you can help me, but our most recent applicant pool for example, for the Sustainability Commission, I think we had 2 or 3 dozen people, and a good chunk of them were PhDs. And so, I mean, we have very qualified folks within the city who want to help out and they want to be involved. But I think you're exactly right, Tim. I don't think there's a broad knowledge of exactly what the Port Authority does and what we actually need as members of the Port Authority. Bob mentioned it earlier, this need for a diverse group, diverse skills, and that's absolutely correct. I do think whether it's this board or all of our boards and commissions in Bloomington, we do need to make a specific and a dedicated effort to make sure that these boards and commissions represent the entire community. I mean, I'm not breaking any ground here, breaking any news to anybody, but there's a lot of old white guys on this board, and myself included, and I think we need to work to diversify this board so it more accurately represents and reflects the people of Bloomington in a lot of different ways. So
Yeah, that's right.
a long-term discussion, and that's I mean, that's not for tonight, but that's part of the discussion that the city council had. That's part of the discussion that Shane and I have had, and we've talked through a few times, and are just looking at different ways to accomplish that.
For the record, without trying to sound disinterested, and I would be willing to step down to be replaced by someone who achieves that objective of representing the city. I mean, that just because I agree, as an old white man,
yeah,
that I'm looking at a lot of myself here.
Yeah,
and for what it's worth, the objective is more important to me than it is my participation. For what it's worth.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that.
Okay, other commissioner comments, anything? And one of the things I would just add, Commissioner Bussey, is that from my experience in a lot of organizations, it's always helpful to look at these things. And again, patterns evolve over time. People kind of do things without thinking about them. And I think to the extent that you make kind of conscious decisions, that's good. So it's a healthy process and necessary to do. So I guess, Shane, I think we've gone through the agenda. Is there anything else that we need to do tonight?
Mr. President and Commissioners, the action item on the work plan and annual report is to accept the annual report and approve the work plan. I think there were a couple of comments that I'll note and change the work plan related to Commissioner Peterson's comments about developing options for small business, growth and retention, and then Commissioner Carter's recommendation on organizational to add a review of the Port Authority mission.
Okay, with that being said, I guess then I would entertain a motion to approve the work plan with modifications as Shane has just talked about.
Mr. President, I would move we accept the 2020 report and approve the 2021 work plan as amended, as Mr. Redlang described.
Do we have a second?
Two.
Okay, that was by Mr. Keller.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. All right, we had a motion made and seconded. And the discussion. Call the rolls, Carolyn.
Bussey?
Aye.
Carter?
Aye.
Erickson?
Aye.
Hunt?
Aye.
Keller?
Aye.
Lunds? You are muted, Bob. There you go. Rob? Lunds?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
7-0. Thank you.
Great. Okay, now do we have anything else, Shane?
No, I think that's it. Mr. President and Commissioners, appreciate all that you do for the Port Authority, and we look forward to serving you again in 2021.
Good job.
Let me just comment. I think when we talk about thanking people, we forget to thank Carolyn Lane many times. He has to sit back and do all the logistics. I know Rhonda's up from time to time with things. So Carolyn, we very much appreciate the work that you've done and have done for many years for the city. So
Thank you, Bob. Thank you all.
unless there's something else to be on the agenda, I think we can say it's time to adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Everybody stay healthy. Stay safe.